Millennial and Gen Zs are reshaping the world. News generation shares their fresh perspectives on what's trending now. From global developments to everyday culture, we're diving into the stories that matter. This is News Generation.
Global heritage will unite. We share brilliant values and honor the world's most cherished legacies to pass our heritage on to future generations. Busan invites you. The 48th session of UNESCO World Heritage Committee. July 2026, Busan, Korea.
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Two major U.S. investors in e-commerce giant Coupang have notified the Korean government that they plan to file arbitration claims, accusing authorities of discriminatory actions against the firm. This follows a series of investigations into the U.S.-listed company after a massive customer data breach affected more than 33 million customer accounts. Top U.S. negotiators, including Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, have met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. This comes after U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had a meeting in Davos, which both leaders described as positive. Netflix animated film KPop Demon Hunters has earned 2 Oscar nominations, Best Animated Feature and Best Original Song for Golden. The film also won Best Animated Film and Best Song at the Golden Globes and the Critics' Choice Awards earlier this month. We begin this morning with U.S. investors in e-commerce giant Coupang moving toward international arbitration after accusing South Korea of discriminatory regulatory actions following a massive data breach investigation. The investors have also urged Washington to launch a trade probe, raising the dispute to a potential South Korea-U.S. trade issue. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
Two major U.S. investors in e-commerce giant Coupang have formally notified the South Korean government of their intent to pursue international arbitration, accusing authorities of discriminatory treatment toward the U.S.-listed firm. Green Oaks Capital Partners and Altimeter Capital Management said Thursday they plan to file arbitration claims under the South Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. The move follows a series of South Korean government investigations into Coupang after a massive customer data breach was revealed last November. In a notice sent to President Lee Jae-myung and the Justice Ministry, the investors said their combined equity stake in Coupang exceeds $1.5 billion. They argued that regulatory pressure intensified as Coupang gained market share from domestic Korean and Chinese competitors. In a separate filing to the Office of the United States Trade Representative, the investors also urged Washington to launch a probe under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 and consider trade remedies. They claimed that enforcement actions against Coupang far exceeded those faced by rival firms. The investors cited hundreds of audits, inspections, and penalties imposed by multiple South Korean agencies, including the Fair Trade Commission, tax authorities, labor regulators, and financial watchdogs. They described the data breach as limited and accused officials of exaggerating the incident to inflame public opinion and harm the company. They also said the regulatory campaign erased billions of dollars in market value, losses they say were borne by U.S. shareholders, including retirement funds. In response, the Blue House said the investigation should not be viewed as a trade dispute with the U.S., stressing that the probe reflects the unprecedented scale of the data leak and is being conducted in accordance with South Korean law. Coupang was founded by Korean-American entrepreneur Kim Bum-seok and generates about 90% of its revenue in South Korea. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in other news, amid geopolitical tensions, the price of gold continues to soar, and many analysts believe the surge is here to stay. Our correspondent Park Jun-an explains more.
The price of gold is skyrocketing day by day. And this is not just an upward trend that has been going on in the past few months. Even though the price of gold is rapidly rising, investors are actively buying it, an asset that does not decay, retains value, and is globally accepted.
My mother turned 60 this year, so I came to buy a gold bracelet as a commemorative gift. Gold prices have risen a lot recently, but I think they may continue to climb, so I felt it was better to buy it sooner rather than later.
The sharp rise in gold prices has been particularly evident over the last few years, and especially when U.S. President Donald Trump was inaugurated in January 2025. In the past 5 years, the price of gold has risen from around $1,852 per troy ounce to approximately $4,800. This is a 159.1% increase over that period. And when it comes to Korean won, the increase becomes far more pronounced. Over the same 5-year period, the purchase price of gold jumped from just 271,000 won per ton, or 3.75 grams, to 993,000 won. That marks a 266.4% increase. Although international gold prices have steeply risen, the hike is seen more prominently in Korea, with the dollar value against the Korean won appreciating by more than 33% in those 5 years. Alongside that, buying physical gold in Korea can add 15% to the price due to value-added tax and labor charges. Now, as you can see, this 1 kilogram gold bar I'm holding is worth more than 265 million Korean won, or roughly 180,000 US dollars. The managing director of the Korea Gold Exchange, whose company produces and sells billions of dollars worth of gold and silver annually in Korea, says global uncertainty has driven the steep price hikes.
Global economic instability, ongoing wars, and uncertainty surrounding the U.S. dollar's depreciation have all combined to push gold prices sharply higher, with new issues continuing to emerge, including the situation involving Greenland just yesterday. Uncertainty is intensifying, and that upward trend appears to be gaining further momentum.
Looking ahead, long-term gold prices will be shaped by a mix of inflationary trends, interest rates, and geopolitical risks. Alongside this, global economic uncertainty and monetary policy will also be key factors affecting prices. Park Jun-an, Arirang News.
South Korea's benchmark stock index, the KOSPI, has finally surpassed the 5,000-point mark, a milestone that once seemed out of reach but arrived much sooner than many had expected. For more on this, we're joined today by Dr. Sung-soo Eric Kim, founder and CEO of DataCrunch Global and adjunct professor at Yonsei Graduate School of Business. Dr. Kim, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So what do you think were the main drivers behind the Korean stock market rally?
So I think there's a couple of components that is driving the current rally. First, it's very monumental to see a 5,000 index in KOSPI because that was one of the promises of President Lee during his election. And there's also a special committee on KOSPI 5,000. So I think it's very monumental that we have achieved the 5,000 index, which has been a dream for a long time. There are a couple of components. First, we are seeing a very, very strong tech sector. Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix is the center of the global semiconductor manufacturing. And we can imagine from the AI boom and also the robotics boom and data center booms that Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix is a very valuable investment. So they are leading the index to grow to 5,000. Other aspects is the high currency rate. Korean won greatly depreciated. So there's also a factor of inflated assets that we're observing. So there's two factors tangled together with each other, a real growth and also some kind of a inflation in the assets. The other factors is the movement of capital. A lot of money from the real estate has been moved to the stock market. So that's also an additional factor that is driving the 5,000 index.
Right, like you just mentioned, much of the market's rise has been led by the two largest companies by market cap, Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. How long do you see the semiconductor boom lasting, and what's your outlook for the industry for the rest of the year?
So I've been commenting publicly when it comes to a question of whether there's an AI bubble. I'm saying that we have to decouple the AI discussion with the semiconductor discussion because we are seeing duplicated investment in data centers. And through CES 2026, I think everyone understood that physical AI is right around the corner. That all requires semiconductors, which are manufactured in two places in the world, Korea and Taiwan. So we're seeing a strong growth in the semiconductor sector, regardless of whether AI is in a bubble or not. And of course, even if the large language models AI is in a bubble, we're seeing that the physical AI sector is growing. So I think that this cycle will be extended for at least some time. And that's the optimism that global investors are looking into Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, when it comes to investing for the future, outlooking that this technological trends will continue for some time in the future.
I see. And while the stock market continues to set new record highs every day, the Korean won is nearing its weakest level in more than a decade. The Korean government has pointed to continued overseas investment by Korean retail investors as a major factor. What are your thoughts on this, and are there any other factors we should be paying attention to?
So I think one of the fundamental reasons why the Korean won is greatly depreciated is, of course, what you have mentioned, the capital outflow from Korea to foreign investors, foreign locations, destinations for investment. So this is both the current companies investing in overseas and also foreign investors withdrawing from our capital markets. So these are two phenomena going simultaneously. So what we really have to work on is to make Korea a promising place to invest. We have to make our market more friendlier for foreign investments and also encourage Korean companies to invest in Korea so that we can manage the weak won situation. If you look at the trade numbers, we're having a record high surplus in trade. So in that sense, the Korean won should be stronger from the trade side, but it's the capital side that is outflowing from Korea. So we have to pay a keen attention on the capital management of Korea and making Korea an attractive investment market.
Right, and even the IMF has warned that South Korea's ratio of dollar-denominated assets is exposed to outsized currency risks. What steps should the government take to sort of manage these risks and support the Korean won?
So IMF is saying that our dollar-denominated assets overseas that are exposed to risk is 20 times our trading volume, foreign currency trading volume in Korea when it comes to US dollar to won. That's higher than Japan. Japan is lower than 20 times. The highest ratio is Taiwan, which is about 45 times. So the current government has to pay close attention on the global currency markets so that we don't have that risk exposed. I think it was a good strategy that the Korean Pension Service did a hedging with the Korean bank to manage this risk exposure from the overseas. But we have to also pay attention to the private assets that are being exposed to the currency risk. So I think it's a good time for the Bank of Korea to pay a good attention to these situations. Of course, the government and Bank of Korea is working together very, very tightly to manage the depreciated won situation. But I think that we need to show a more bold strategies, even thinking about considering what we should do with our monetary policy and our interest rates. But that's a very difficult discussion because we have a very high debt rate right now, which makes it hard for our governments to increase the interest rates. But a fiscal policy of having contraction of the fiscal policy might help managing the situation.
Right, I guess we'll have to see how that goes. All right, Dr. Kim, thank you so much for your time and insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff began talks in Moscow late on Thursday night. This high-stakes meeting comes hours after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and U.S. President Donald Trump met at Davos. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more. Top U.S. negotiators, including Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow late on Thursday. In a statement posted on Telegram, the Kremlin said that talks between Putin and Witkoff were underway. President Putin had previously indicated that he would discuss with Witkoff a plan to allocate $1 billion from Russia's frozen assets in the United States into the Board of Peace, a new international body proposed by Trump. Before that, U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had a meeting on Thursday in Davos, Switzerland, which both of them described positively. On the sidelines of the World Economic Forum, the two leaders had an hour-long session on post-war security guarantees for Ukraine and plans for economic reconstruction.
I had a very good meeting with President Zelensky. Everybody wants to have the war end.
Zelensky, too, gave a positive assessment of the talks and added that Ukrainian and Russian teams will have their first trilateral meeting with U.S. officials in the United Arab Emirates on Friday and Saturday.
And I think that it will be the first trilateral meeting in Emirates. It will be tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. Yes, it will be 2 days meetings in Emirates.
Witkoff, who is visiting the Kremlin, also said earlier that he believed the two sides were down to one issue without elaborating. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News. Netflix hit animated film KPop Demon Hunters has earned 2 Oscar nominations. The nominees for the 98th Academy Awards were announced on Thursday, with the film recognized for Best Animated Feature and Best Original Song for Golden. co-directed by Korean-Canadian filmmaker Maggie Kang and American director Chris Applehans. The movie was released last June and quickly became Netflix's most-watched film of all time. Earlier this month, the film also won Best Animated Film and Best Song at the Golden Globes and the Critics' Choice Awards. The Oscars will be held on March 15th. Meanwhile, the Seoul city government has conditionally approved a request by K-pop megastars BTS to hold a comeback show in Gwanghwamun Square in March. BTS agency HYBE asked for the BTS 2026 comeback show at Seoul to be held in the downtown square on March 21st. And in a meeting on Thursday, Seoul City granted conditional approval on safety conditions being met. The concert will mark BTS' return as a full group after 3 years and 9 months, and is expected to take place the day after the group released their 5th full-length album, Arirang. The Korean Olympic Committee announced Thursday that it has finalized its roster for this year's Olympic Winter Games in Milan, with a total of 71 athletes set to compete. The size of the Korean delegation marks a slight increase from the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, where 65 athletes participated. 2,900 athletes from 90 national Olympic committees will compete for 116 gold medals in a total of 16 events in 8 sports for these Winter Olympics opening on February 7th. The South Korean athletes are set to depart for Italy on January 30th. South Korean baseball star and San Francisco Giants outfielder Jung-hoo was briefly detained by U.S. immigration authorities following his arrival in Los Angeles. Our Chung Hae-rim tells us more.
San Francisco Giants outfielder Jung-hoo was stopped by U.S. Customs and Border Protection when he arrived at Los Angeles International Airport on Wednesday local time, before being released about an hour later. He had flown in from South Korea ahead of scheduled team activities, including a fan event in California and preparations for spring training. However, a required entry document had been left behind in Korea, according to a statement by the Giants to The Athletic on the same day, triggering a temporary hold on Lee. The situation was resolved with assistance from the San Francisco Giants organization and federal authorities, according to the San Francisco Chronicle. The report stated that a spokesperson for Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives and whose district includes San Francisco, also intervened. E's agent Scott Boris cleared up possible speculation that the detention was related to the tightened immigration policies of the Trump administration. Boris told U.S. media that the incident was, quote, not political. The Giants echoed that assessment, saying the issue was quickly clarified and E was cleared to continue his travel. Now entering his 3rd season with the team, E is expected to resume his off-season schedule without disruption. He is also set to represent South Korea at the World Baseball Classic in March. The team says no further issues are expected. Jung Hae-rim, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. President Donald Trump inaugurated his Board of Peace at the World Economic Forum on Thursday, pitching it as a global body to help maintain the Israel-Hamas ceasefire and guide Gaza's future. Trump claimed that 59 countries had signed on, but officials from only 19 countries joined at the signing ceremony in Davos. Those who rejected the invite includes several key U.S. allies, among them Britain and France, citing concerns over extending an invite to Russian President Vladimir Putin and fear that the board could undermine the United Nations. Trump said the board will stabilize Gaza and, following its success, spread to other things. He also said the Board of Peace would work in conjunction with the United Nations. President Trump on Thursday filed a $5 billion lawsuit against JPMorgan Chase and its CEO, Jamie Dimon. Trump alleges the bank abruptly closed multiple accounts in February 2021 with 60 days notice and no explanation after he left office in January 2021. The suit claims the closures disrupted his businesses, cut off access to millions of dollars, and forced urgent moves to other banks. It also alleges a reputational blacklist. JPMorgan denies all allegations and labeled the suit meritless, adding it closes accounts for legal or regulatory risk, not politics. Colombia on Thursday said it will suspend electricity sales to Ecuador and impose a 30% tariff on 20 Ecuadorian products, escalating a dispute over trade and anti-drug trafficking cooperation. The move followed Ecuador's President Daniel Noboa's announcement a day earlier of a 30% security charge on Colombian goods starting February 1st, citing a trade deficit and limited cooperation against trafficking. Colombia's energy ministry said it suspended electricity transactions as a preventive step to protect domestic supply amid climate variability and said it will reactivate exports when conditions allow. In Japan, Tokyo Electric Power Company shut down a reactor at the world's largest nuclear power plant just hours after its restart. TEPCO on Thursday suspended the restart of the number 6 reactor at the Kashiwazaki Kariwa nuclear plant in Niigata a day after workers began the restart process. It said a malfunction linked to control rods forced a halt, adding that the reactor is stable and that there had been no radioactive impact outside the plant. TEPCO said it is investigating malfunctioning electrical equipment and returned the unit to shutdown for a fuller examination. The plant had been closed since the 2011 Fukushima disaster.
The week began with a deep freeze and cold conditions are still holding firm across much of the country. Cold wave alerts remain in place for most regions, with many parts seeing temperatures dropping below -10 degrees Celsius again this morning. But afternoon temperatures will rise compared to yesterday. Then from late this afternoon, snow will begin along the west coast. And by tonight, snow could expand to more central areas. By early tomorrow, the west coast of Jeollado province could see up to 7 centimeters of snowfall. Gangwon-do might get 1 to 3 centimeters. Seoul and nearby areas might get around 1 centimeter. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to -1 degree Celsius. Daegu topping out at 4 degrees. Now, meanwhile, dry weather alerts have been expanded and upgraded in eastern regions, raising fire concerns. The cold wave will persist through the weekend. While the worst of the cold has passed, temperatures will remain below normal. Stay warm in this freezing weather.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
누나가 발레를 하다 보니까 자연스럽게 누나 발레 학원에 따라가서 누나가 하는 모습을 보니까 저도 하고 싶다고 생각이 조금 들어서 발레 음악에 맞춰서 아무 춤이나 추다 보니까 그냥 그 음악에 맞춰서 제가 몸을 움직이는 게 재밌다고 느껴졌었는지 발레를 계속 하고 있더라고요. 나이가 좀 어릴 때 제가 가진 장점이 무엇인지도 모르고 아예 제가 가진 단점도 모를 때 발레를 시작했다 보니까 제일 큰 문제가 이제 평발이었던 것 같아요. 평발이다 보니까 발레를 할 때 쥐가 조금 많이 나는 편이라 그거를 견뎌가면서 춤을 계속 춰야 했던 거 그게 가장 극복하기 힘들었던 것 같고요. 제가 다리가 다른 친구들보다 조금 두껍다고 해서 제 다리를 조금 싫어했었는데 근데 이제 로잔에 갔다 오고 나서 오히려 제 다리에서 나오는 파워풀한 힘이 좋았다고 해주시는 분들도 있다는 걸 느껴가지고 그 두 개가 가장 극복하기도 힘들었고 기억에 남는 것 같아요. 프릭스티 로잔이라는 콩쿨 자체가 학생들 사이에서는 가장 크고 의미 있는 콩쿨이다 보니 제가 그 로잔 영상을 보면서 자라왔기 때문에 그 무대에 서서 제가 춤을 췄다는 것 자체가 엄청 인상 깊었던 것 같아요. 제가 걸어왔던 길, 이게 맞는 방법일까? 근데 그런 의구심을 다 없앨 수 있게 제가 가는 길이 맞았다라는 거를 확인시켜줬던 것 같아요. 그래서 그런 감정이 들어서 조금 감격스러웠던 것 같아요. 한 배역에만 잘 할 수 있는 명수가 아니라 어떠한 배역을 받아도 다 넣어서 소화해낼 수 있는 그런 스펙트럼이 넓은 명수가 되고 싶습니다.
drawing more fans from all over the world. Local consumer prices continue to hover at the 2% success rate in April.
Turning to robots to allow the visually impaired the chance to better indulge in cultural experiences. Like the number of hybrid cars are registered in South Korea has surpassed 2 million with this locally developed Yuri rocket.
Arirang.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation. Bringing news just for you is Friday, January 23rd here in Seoul. I'm Isujin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Cheska.
Happy Friday, everyone!
Happy Friday! Happy Friday! Sita's with us.
Yes, great to be here.
Great to have you, and both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So as we wrap up the week, here's something you might have noticed around you. So Korea has officially entered the era of 2 million long-term foreign residents. From your neighborhood cafes to public transport and workplaces, foreigners are becoming a more visible part of everyday life. So Cheska, have you also personally noticed an increase in foreigners living in Korea in recent years?
Yeah, and I love having international friends around, so it's great to see more foreigners entering South Korea and actually living permanently. I think one of the interesting things I've noticed is that my international friends actually reach out to me and say, hey, I've seen this about Korea, how is it living there, like what's the process like? And they usually refer to like a K-drama and ask me, I know, right? So she knows what I'm trying to say, and then ask me if it's close to reality. And I am very, very careful to let them know, of course, the pros, but the cons they have to think about when they do move into Korea. But that all goes to show that more and more people are excited and are actually living in South Korea, as we'll talk about today.
This is where expectations versus reality comes in.
Very much so, yeah.
What about you, Rosina?
So yeah, when I first came to Korea, I came here as a part of my student exchange program. And yeah, after studying Korean language, and it wasn't driven by Korean wave at first. And then rather, I was genuinely interested in learning the language. And then what ultimately made me stay longer here was the confidence I gained after staying here for a long time, handling everyday tasks. And then these everyday experiences actually made me feel more connected to my surrounding. So yeah, I stayed. This is like my 5th year here now. So
wow, so you are the perfect person to join us in the studio as a long-term foreign resident yourself. And that's such a great point. Sometimes not the big moments, but those everyday wins that really make a place start to feel like home. So we're going to talk more about this, but first, let's take a look at the screen. South Korea is increasingly gaining global attention as a country that people want to live in. And the numbers back it up. More foreigners are choosing to move here and make Korea their long-term home. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at what makes life in Korea especially appealing for long-term residents, the personal experiences behind that choice, and our practical tips for foreigners considering long-term life in Korea. As we just saw in the video, more and more foreigners are choosing not just to visit Korea, but to stay. So let's start with the big picture. So Cheska, when we talk about long-term foreign residents, what does this exactly mean? Just how much has that number grown in recent years?
Yes, so when we talk about a long-term resident in Korea are defined as individuals who legally obtain a visa, register with the Ministry of Justice, and stay in the country for more than 90 days. Now, once registered, they are issued a foreigner registration card, which functions very similarly to a Korea's resident ID card, which is very important to do daily tasks. Now, let's take a look at the screen to see how fast the numbers have grown. Now, the number of long-term Korean foreign residents increased significantly from about 1.57 million in 2021 to over 2 million in 2024. Now, foreigners also come to Korea either to study or to work. So one of the options that has become especially popular is the working holiday visa, which actually allows young people to live in Korea while earning an income at the same time. So let's quickly take a look at the screen. Now, the growth has been quite striking. If you look at the numbers, the number of foreigners entering Korea on this working holiday visa jumped from just around 3,000 in 2022 to around 11,000 in 2024. That's more than 3 times in a span of 2 years. Now, this sharp increase, I think, reflects Korea's growing appeal, not just as a travel destination, but as a place where young people really want to come around the world and experience this daily life, work, culture, and even stay for a long term. And I think this is sort of changing the demographic landscape of South Korea as well. As we talked about, we're seeing more foreigners. It's becoming a little bit more multicultural, hopefully. Yeah.
You can see the change around you as well. So those numbers really show how dramatic the change has been, especially the surge in working holiday visas. But beyond the numbers, there are obviously clear reasons why Korea has become an attractive place for foreigners to stay long term. So, Rosita, what is it, do you think, about the life here that makes people want to experience this long term?
I think it's because life in Korea feels both convenient and comfortable. And it's easy to get around in Korea without driving, and the country feels safe and well organized, which makes everyday task life less stressful. So many people are also drawn in by Korean culture and end up wanting to experience it beyond just visiting. So what often starts as a short visit, whether for travel or language study, can turn into longer stay as people grow attached to simple routines like eating local food, using neighborhood facilities, or spending time along the Han River. And these experiences actually make Korea feel less like a place to visit and more like a place to live in.
And that's kind of what happened to you too, right?
Yeah.
You came here to study language, and now you're here 5 years.
Yeah.
The idea of Korea as a place you don't just want to visit, but actually want to live like a local really stands out. From everyday safety to pop culture and simple routines like eating out or spending time by the Han River, it's easy to see the appeal. So we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on the Arirang News YouTube channel asking, why would you like to stay in Korea long term? So here's what the results showed. More than half of the respondents, 53%, pointed to Korea's safety and convenient public transportation as the biggest reasons. And 21% said they were drawn to the overall K-content-driven lifestyle experience, while 13% chose Korean food, and the remaining 13% cited other personal reasons. So what really stands out is that everyday factors like safety and transportation matter even more than pop culture. So it's interesting that while K-content, it seems to be what draws people in, it's really the quality of daily life that makes them want to stay. So to better understand this trend, we're going to speak with someone from Canada who is also living in Korea long term. And that conversation would take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Sydney, a long-term Korean resident from Canada. So hello, Sydney. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So how long have you lived in Korea, and what first brought you here, and why did you decide to stay here long term?
So I have been living in Korea permanently since 2019 August, but I've been coming here, like living here, all my time put together, 8.5 years, but I've been coming here for 13 years since June 2012. And I came here first because I got an opportunity to do a summer exchange program at Seoul University. And after that, I traveled a bit, and then I fell in love with Busan, and I lived in Busan for a while. And I just kept coming back. And so I've lived in Seoul, Busan, Hongcheong, Gangwon-do, and Daejeon as well. So.
Sydney, I think you lived in some of the beautiful places around Korea. And as we talked about today, there are many international people who are interested in actually visiting and living in Korea. So please share with us, what was the process of becoming a long-term resident like? You know, perhaps obtaining a visa, finding a place, you know, opening a bank account. Share some of your experiences with us, please.
Well, it's not easy,
I know it's a lot,
right?
Yeah.
It's not easy. Even if you know Korean, it's not exactly the most straightforward as one might think. First, getting like a bank account was very complicated because at the times that I was doing it, you needed to have already a visa, but in order to have a visa, you needed to be here for a certain time. And then in order to get a bank account, you also needed a phone number. But in order to get a bank account, you needed to have a, like, if you had a phone number, you needed to have a bank account. So it was really just so many back and forth type of things I had to do. Asking my Korean friends for help or just trying to do it by myself was a lot of the time. Getting the visa itself, like my current visa, I'm F2, which is 고주 visa, so semi-permanent resident visa. And that's one of the harder ones to get because it's point-based, which is funny because today I actually have to go to renew my visa. And so it's a lot of things that you have to prepare. One of the things I can't stress enough is having knowledge of Korean, like doing the KPop program, doing TOPIK. Those will be your biggest helpers in maintaining and obtaining your visas, as well as just being interested in Korean life, learning more about it, because that'll become part of your tests that you'll do for your visas. And education. Korea is a country very big into education. Same with Canada, actually, as I think we're like the second or the most educated country, secondary type of education. And so here, especially, having education in Korea is very important in getting your visas as well. And that's what I was very lucky to have. I was part of the GKS program, so Government Korea Scholarship Program, where I was able to obtain my master's through them. So that was a big help in obtaining my visa.
Yeah, as a foreigner myself, I do agree that our feeling is mutual, Sydney. So despite all of that, so what do you enjoy most about living in Korea?
Oh, there's so much. Like, as you have mentioned as well, it's the convenience of it all. Like, public transportation is amazing, especially compared to Canada, I'm sorry to say, but Korea is hands down so much better than Canada's transportation. It's fast. For my personality, I like the bali-bali 문화, and so the very fast type thing. When I go back to Canada, I feel it's way too slow, just, why? And so when I'm here, I just be like, okay, yeah, I can do things. There's always something going on. So even if you want to be alone, you can be alone in your own house or whatever, but I like being alone when I go to a cafe. And so I'm not alone, but I have people around me, and there's always something going on. You're walking down the streets, that you'll see potentially a filming going on, or you'll see an interview. You'll hear busking. You'll see some sort of like festival or whatever. So there's always something for someone to do, and there's tons of groups that you can join as well. And it's just, it feels more welcoming for me, and I feel more comfortable living here, and there's lots more for me to do, especially at my current age, and most likely in the future as well. So
yeah, I think safety and public transportation are often things overlooked by locals. I'm really glad you highlighted that. And also, yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
No, thank you so much for having me, and good luck to everyone who wants to get their visa here in Korea.
And hope your renewal process goes well today too.
Me too.
Okay.
So we just heard from our guest from Canada who shared what the long-term stay process was like and what makes living in Korea especially rewarding. So now let's bring the conversation back to our panelists. So Cheska, what are the aspects about living in Korea that really stand out to you? I know you didn't always live in Korea.
Yeah, and I think having lived in so many different countries, this really stands out to me. Korea is known for the convenience and the abundance of 24-hour places.
That's a good one.
And this is something that, as you said, I think a lot of locals can overlook because we're so used to it, right? But in major cities like Seoul, Busan, I mean, you name it. Honestly, any city in Korea, people can access supermarkets, 찜질방, hot sauna, one of my favorite during the season, karaoke rooms, restaurants, and we cannot not talk about the delivery service and how amazing it is at almost any hour of the day. And what's so beautiful about Korea is that it's perfect for early active goers and people like me who wants to run at 8 a.m. and still rave at noon, to night outers who want to party at night. And the fact that so many businesses operate late into the night, I think reflects something very, very important and deeper, which Sydney also talked about as our interviewee. Korea's relatively strong public safety. I think the ability to move around, eat, and even work late at night is often seen as a sign of society where people can generally feel very secure, even after dark. And there were so many times that I was working late into the night at my office, and I still very felt safe walking back home, even though it was late and there was nobody on the street. So I think those are the things that I would never feel when I was living in New York or, God forbid, LA. Yeah. So I think one of those things is safety and convenience is definitely something a lot of foreigners look forward to when they come here.
Right. I feel like when I also lived in the States, hearing police sirens was so commonplace.
Yeah.
Obviously here in Korea, that's not really a thing.
Right.
Safe.
I was actually living in New York, Manhattan. I was talking to my sister who came. We hear ambulance silence all the time.
It's like part of daily life.
It is a part of a daily musical background melody.
Exactly. And also that, and also that 24-hour lifestyle, it really is unique. And it says a lot of that convenience and safety go hand in hand. So, Rosita, how about you? What's something you personally love the most about living in Korea?
Okay, so like as mentioned before, transportation here is amazing. So I like that I can go anywhere without even knowing how to drive. And the public transportation system is well developed, and the streets are designed in a way that makes walking easy. So I didn't used to enjoy walking, but after living in Korea, I started to like exploring different parts of my neighborhood on foot. So spending more time walking alone also gave me more time to think, and it made me feel that I've grown while living in Korea.
So it's interesting how something as simple as walkability and public transport can really change the way you live and even how you think. So for those considering a long-term stay, now let's talk about what advice we can give. So what advice would you give to foreigners thinking about moving to Korea long-term? Jessica, this is a big question.
It is a big question. And I personally love this question because I too, Sujin, as you know, I've lived in many, many different parts of the world. So every time I was there, I always had to adjust. So I know what it's like to be a foreigner coming into a country where you may not have as many ties, many knowledge of the country. But I think it is really, really important to be open-minded and not be afraid of challenges, because as our interviewee talked about, some of the processes in Korea is not going to be easy. And some of the things that are happening in Korea is not going to be what you imagined from, you know, what's the show that is hot on Netflix, you know, K-dramas and, you know, KPop Demon Hunters. It's not going to be like that. It's not always music and it's not always rainbows. But I think those are the important things about life, and do not be afraid to ask questions. Korean people are very willing to help when approached. So do not be afraid to approach, ask questions, and go over some of the challenges, because once you get over those, Korea, I think, is a pretty great place to live.
What would you say is your favorite part? Because you lived in New Zealand, you lived in the States. What is something special about Korea that made you stay kind of long term?
I think one of the things that will make me stay is this so-called tong. So in Korea, it's kind of hard to do it in English, but it's like the intimacy between people that exists even when you are strangers coming closer. But I actually notice this even when I get service from people. So like when I go to the
restaurants?
In restaurants, in banks, when I have a broken faucet and need to call someone, the fact that they come so fast and they're so kind when they're giving a service, I think when you have lived in overseas where it takes a month to fix your broken sink and a yourself. You learn how to fix the toilet by the time.
DIY, everything DIY.
And they come and they do it so nicely. I just want to give them something.
Right, I agree.
Yeah, so I think those are the most wonderful things that I've actually noticed living in Korea. Yeah.
And I think those are beautiful points, and also to not rush the adjustment process, especially when living in a very different environment. So, Rosita, what would you like to add? Any advice from your personal experience?
Okay, so life in Korea, as you all know, isn't always as romantic as it appears in the media. For example, Koreans tend to have high expectations when it comes to evaluating people, and this leads to strong moral standards and even makes things like unmet still possible. But from a foreigner's perspective, it can sometimes feel like you have to be very mindful of your behavior. And that said, most Koreans are very warm-hearted and kind. So if you're facing difficulties, it's best not to worry too much about appearances and to ask people around you for help.
That's very sound advice. So from safety and convenience to a growing sense of community, it's clear that for many foreigners, Korea isn't just a place to visit. It's a place to truly call home. And as more people choose to stay long-term, the question now is how Korea continues to evolve as a place where people from around the world don't just live, but truly belong. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back on Monday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. Big thanks to Cheska.
Pleasure's always mine, thank you.
Also Rosina.
Always happy to be here.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have the best weekend. We are News Generation.